Thanks for being here tonight. We have a very special show for you with a very special guest, Susun Weed. Her website is susunweed.com. She's into herbal medicine, ethnobotany. She's a teacher, shaman. We could probably even call her a green witch. Teaches incredible workshops up in her property in New York. That is Woodstock. Teaches college and speaks all over, teaching all about herbal medicine, ethnobotany, psychology of healing, etc. My goodness, it's so good to have you here this beautiful Wednesday, Susun. How are you doing tonight?
Green blessings. I'm so honored to be with you, Christy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to have you here. You've done so much, and I'm just thankful that you fit us into your busy schedule. And I know I left a lot out there in your intro. You also have a radio show and just, oh my gosh, so many things. I'd love for you to tell us about that. But if you could, I'd like to hear your start in herbs and how that happened in a Manhattan apartment.
Well, I was one of the first groups of women to take birth control pills in the United States.
Oh.
And I kept going and saying that I thought I was pregnant, and they kept telling me that it was a side effect of the pills until I was 5 months pregnant.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
And this was way before the time of sonograms.
Mm-hmm.
But it was exactly during the time of thalidomide.
Wow. Okay, so were you like a test subject as far as the pill is concerned, or?
It was not an actual test subject. No, it had already been released to the public, and I got my birth control pills from Planned Parenthood. But it was just at the very, very beginning of that, and we really didn't have much idea what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And I think I got pregnant while I was menstruating.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yep.
And
it's, it's not that unusual, although it's certainly not usual. Mm-hmm. At any rate, there I was, 5 months pregnant, and opening the newspaper and seeing pictures of babies without arms and legs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
From a drug that pregnant women had been given. And it scared me.
Yeah, definitely.
And like any pregnant woman, I had my share of aches and pains and oofs and oughs.
Yeah.
So I took myself to the main branch of the public library in Manhattan, with the big stone lions, and I went up all those big stone steps. Pregnant as I was, it took me a while. And I went in and I asked for help in locating books about herbs and herbal medicine, and the librarian helped me find all 4.
Oh, all 4 out of their 4 million books. Huh?
Well, that's all that was available to me at that point. Now, certainly if I had read, say, German or French or even Russian, there would have been a lot more available to me, even in that library. But in the early to mid-'60s, there's very little written about herbs and herbal medicine. So what was written, and what 3 of those books told me, was to put dill with my cucumbers and basil with my tomatoes. And it's very good advice.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sure, to put dill with your cucumbers and basil with your tomatoes.
Yeah, and that's what they taught you in those 4 books they had in that humongous library.
That's more what the books focused on than what I was really looking for. By the very early 70s, Ewell Gibbons was on the scene. And Ewell Gibbons was a wonderful and a fun person who was just really turned on by nature and really wanted to share it and happened to be connected so that he could share it. And he wrote a whole series of books about working with wild foods.
Oh, okay.
Right, stalking the blue-eyed scallops, stalking the wild asparagus. Mm-hmm. And by this point, my daughter was 2 years old, and I realized that it was more important for her to have a relationship with nature than to have a relationship with other children.
Oh, yeah, that's a good lesson to learn.
I was staying in the city because people said, well, you have a child and she needs to have a relationship with all these other people, da-da-da, you can't move to the country, even though I wanted to. But I thought, well, what about her relationship with nature? So we'd moved to the country, and I had my first garden. And perhaps even some of the listeners are in a similar situation right now that they're exploring their first garden. Well, nowadays, some of the seed packages actually show you what the little sprout looks like, but I didn't have that option. So I just had to let everything grow. I mean, I had this little, it wasn't any much bigger than a yoga mat garden. Mm-hmm. And I had planted my basil and my dill and my other herbs, and then all this other stuff grew, and I didn't know quite what it was. And then here comes Yule Gibbons telling me this other stuff that's growing in my garden that I didn't plant, it's better food and it's better medicine than what I did plant.
I'm sure there's many of us in that same situation. In fact, it wasn't until I was a single mother myself before I moved to the country, or even before that, started planting my gardens. So I totally understand when you're like, things start coming up and, well, what is this? What are we supposed to be looking for? So, okay,
right.
So kind of self-talk.
Is this a thing I planted, or is this a thing nature planted?
Yeah, who did this?
Right. And being an essentially lazy gardener, in other words, not liking to spend lots and lots of time killing plants, I learned to coexist.
Teach
your others how to.
Started shortly after your vegetable growing days?
Well, I still, I was thinking this afternoon, I pretend to grow vegetables so people won't think it's so weird that I grow weeds.
I totally hear that. That's a good one.
I always put in a couple dozen tomato plants and some squash plants, and, we get the beans in there and some cabbages and so on. But really, my gardens are a place for me to grow weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And both edible and medicinal weeds. All spring, we've been harvesting nettle.
I love nettles. Can you share with us what you use nettles for?
Well, I was just going to ask you, what is it that you love about nettle?
Well, it's really good. Well, I'm sure everybody knows it's good for their liver and stuff, but I make teas with it. I make tea blends and kind of mix it with a bunch of other herbs, red clover, dandelion, sometimes peppermint. So I kind of have like about 80-ish herbs that I forage myself and make teas and tinctures with. So, when I say nettles, people usually jump and they're like, what are you doing with that? So, but I mean, you are definitely the wise woman and tons more. In fact, you have more experience than I've been alive. So.
Well, I do talk about nettle in my big green book, Healing Wise. Mm-hmm. And I often say that it's stinging nettle because nettle carries the charge of the energy of the earth.
Yeah.
When you touch it, you get like a shock from the earth itself. And my apprentices harvest nettle barehanded. I do too. I teach them how to do it, how to deal with that energy. That's one of your shamanic skills there. And we make nettle soup. We drop the fresh nettle into boiling water, and we boil it for about 2 hours, turn the fire off, let it sit at the back of the stove all day, and then bring it up to a boil an hour or two before dinner and boil it again.
Okay.
And this way we start to get some of the nutrition out of it.
Yeah.
Now, it's very interesting. Nettle is a really superb source of minerals. But as with anything, our ability to get those minerals depends on the breaking of the cell wall within the plant, and the amount of minerals that we get depends on the amount of herb we use.
Okay.
So a dropper full of tincture of nettle contains 0 milligrams of calcium.
Okay.
A cup of tea with a tea blend containing nettle as part of the tea blend contains between 0 and 1 milligram of calcium. I, however, make a nettle infusion. And 1 cup of nettle infusion contains between 200 and 250 milligrams of calcium.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so you drink the whole...
Oh, do you know how I make an infusion?
Well, why don't you tell us?
Okay, I will. First off, I weigh the herb. I weigh out 1 ounce of dried nettle, and it must be dried because, basically there's no nutrition available from fresh plants. We need to break the cell wall and dehydration is a great way to break the cell wall and make all those minerals and vitamins and all the wonderful phytonutrients available to us. So I weigh out 1 ounce of dried cut nettle. And if I've harvested it myself, that's actually the hardest part, is cutting it up. So it's an item of commerce, pretty easy to buy and not too expensive either. And that 1 ounce of dried nettle goes into a 1-quart canning jar. I fill that jar right to the top with boiling water, take a wooden spoon and gently stir it, and the dried plant material will absorb water, and I'll be able to top that jar up with a little more water, and then I put on that 2-part canning jar lid. I was visiting my friend Betsy, and I said, Betsy, what's this kind of like whack in your woodwork here? Right about, this level is some, a clumsy person in a wheelchair. She said, no, that's where I hit my jars of infusion to get the top off. I said, oh, because when you pour that boiling water in there and then put a 1-piece lid on it, like, sucks it right down. So you use that 2-part canning lid, which is 1 flat piece, and then a ring that goes on it. And you can always take the ring off, and then you get your fingernails under the flat piece and pry it out. When you let it sit, for at least 4 hours, I tell you the truth, I do mine overnight.
Okay. And do you shake it up a little, or?
No, you've stirred it, right?
Uh-huh. Okay, so just stirring, that's all is necessary.
That's all that's necessary. Then you get that lid on there, and you turn off the light and go to sleep.
Okay.
And the next morning you wake up and you strain it.
Uh-huh.
Pour it through a strainer, and then you squeeze the plant material to get all the good out of it. And then you do something with the plant material. In New Zealand, my Maori elders said to me, oh, it was so clear and so poignant. They said, don't expect any plant to help you if you throw it in the trash.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right, I'm like, boing, because so many people do. They just take that spent herb and go, gah. And I say, put in a baggie, put the baggie in your pocket, take the elevator down. I don't care if you live in the 53rd floor, and get out there and find some soil and dump that plant into the soil.
Yeah? Or your compost heap or whatever?
Well, if you have the privilege of having a compost heap, but so many people don't. It's the liquid that you drink, and you refrigerate it because it's very protein-rich. The herbs that I use for infusion, stinging nettle by itself, red clover, one of your favorites, also by itself, oat straw by itself, comfrey leaf by itself, and linden flowers by themselves. And I rotate through those 5 infusions, making 1 each evening, and I make a quart per person per day.
Okay. All right. So you drink a quart per person per day?
I generally drink about a quart a day. And, if it's really hot, I might drink 5 or 6 cups.
Okay.
And if I'm over at my daughter's house playing with my granddaughter, I might drink only 2 cups. But let me tell you this story because I think it's so fascinating. A woman wrote to me, and she said that when she was 59 years old, she was diagnosed with severe osteoporosis. And her health care provider was really pushing drugs on her. And she said she didn't want the drugs. And I have to, really say I really support that decision because I'm now dealing with women who have broken bones because they took those drugs. And they feel so upset, and they say, well, I thought I was taking a drug that would prevent broken bones, and they're told, no, it just cures the osteoporosis.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, we'll fix one thing, we'll break 4 more.
Right. And, erosion of the jawbone and dental problems, it's not pretty. So she refused the drugs, and she refused the calcium supplements, too. Over the next 3 years, she said in her letter to me, she lost 3 inches in height. And that means that her spine is actually crumbling. And it's really not a good place to be. And she wrote, she said, I didn't really care about it. I just, hemmed up my pants and hemmed up my skirts. She said, but what was really getting to me was I felt so tired all the time. And her daughter had just graduated from my live-out apprenticeship. And she asked her daughter, what could she do for more energy? And her daughter said, of course, stinging nettle. The energy of the earth. And she was such a good daughter. She got her mom 2 canning jars with the 2-part lids, and she bought her a pound of stinging nettle, and she weighed it out into 1-ounce bags. So all her mom had to do was open one of the baggies, put 1 ounce by weight of nettle into her 1-quart jar, fill the jar to the top with boiling water, stir it a little bit, put some more water in, put that 2-part lid on, turn off the light, go to bed, strain it out the next morning, and refrigerate it. Then drink it. And that's what she did. Well, within 10 days, she called her daughter and she said, I feel like I'm 14 again.
Awesome.
She says, I can't believe it. I'm like, 63 years old here, and I have so much energy. Does that weed woman have any other herbs that I can drink? And so she told her about oat straw. And
I was going to ask you about that next. You read my mind.
Oh, good. I'll tell you, my favorite comment about oat straw comes from a woman in Southern California. And she said, Susan, after menopause, down there, it was so dry. It was like a desert. She said, think sand dunes and camels.
Yeah.
And then I got your book, New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, and I started reading about nourishing herbal infusions, but especially about oat straw, about sexy oat straw, about juicy oat straw, and I started drinking oat straw infusion. I weighed out my 1 ounce of oat straw, put it in a jar, filled it with boiling water, let it steep overnight, tightly covered, strained it out, drank it throughout the day. She said, now down there, it's an oasis with date palms and dancing girls.
That's great.
So she said on Sunday night she'd make a quart of nettle infusion and a quart of oat straw infusion. And then she'd strain them out on Monday morning, refrigerate them, and she would drink them on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then Wednesday night she made a quart of nettle and a quart of red clover. And you like red clover. What do you like red clover for?
Well, I like it in my teas, and I just kind of, I like preventative medicine. So I've just found once I make these, and I guess technically you could call my teas an infusion because I let them sit overnight. But I like to just kind of keep my system clean, my livers and kidneys and my blood. I haven't made any muffins or anything with them yet, but I also like to juice them. I think it's really delicious. So since I've been eating weeds, I have never been sick a day. So, I guess you could say I take it for preventative medicine.
Red clover is the world's leading cancer preventative herb.
Yes.
You're absolutely right on there, and so safe that it's primarily grown as a feed for pregnant and lactating cows.
Yeah, and I mean, especially for our topic tonight, isn't it excellent for sexual and reproductive health, both male and female?
Well, oat straw really takes the top honors, without any doubt. But red clover is, I consider, a fertility aid, and I often joke that if you drink oat straw followed by red clover, send me the baby picture.
Oh, I better stop drinking it. Never mind. No more red clover.
So this woman who had severe osteoporosis was basically drinking 4 quarts of infusion a week, right? Sunday night, she made a quart of nettle and a quart of oat straw. She drank them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Wednesday night she made a quart of nettle and a quart of red clover, and she drank them Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and she said Sunday she took off. Within 2 years, she's now 65 years old, 6 years after her diagnosis of severe osteoporosis. Her doctor calls her up and says, your current bone scan, I cannot believe, because your bones are now more massive and more dense than they were when you were 40 years old.
Amazing. Isn't that? I love those stories. That's beautiful.
And this is one anecdote, but I have heard thousands of anecdotes. I have the Wise Woman University, which is my online distance learning place, and one of my courses is called Drink Your Way to Health with Nourishing Herbal Infusions.
Okay.
You see, these herbs that we're talking about are very different from the scented herbs, because the scented herbs don't carry lavish amounts of proteins. Mm-hmm. They're not as rich in certain really core nutrients, although they are very good antioxidants. But I reserve those scented herbs simply for teas or for seasoning food and never infuse them for the sake of my kidneys and my liver.
Yes.
And so I use only non-scented herbs. As I said, I rotate through 5: nettle, oat straw, red clover, comfrey leaf, and linden. But there are other non-scented herbs that we could use to make infusion. To answer your question, your previous question a little more specifically, hawthorn leaves and flowers, hawthorn berries, rose hips, mullein leaf, cleavers, chickweed, corn silk, marshmallow, burdock root. So, have you done very much with linden? Is linden a tree that grows around you?
If it does, I don't know. So I actually wrote that down to ask you to teach us more about linden. I mean, I have a bunch of herb books, but it's not the same when you look at them out in your yard. So I'm probably batting maybe 40% of what's actually growing around me. I have no clue what the rest is because, you know, black and white, tiny little photos just are not the same. So,
well, as a matter of fact, I suggest that people only use line drawings. And I ask them how many photos that have been taken of you look like you.
That's true.
So plants don't photograph any better than people do. Line drawing will usually catch a person and a plant far better. So I do agree with you. Don't use photographs.
Can you just move in with me? Because, I mean, I'm looking at these photos here, and, you know, there's two of us looking at them, and one is a native here, you know, been here forever, and we just can't recognize it. Although some of the websites that have photos of linden trees say they're in Kentucky and, you know, places nearby, so I'm assuming there is one here. You know, can you recommend something for people who don't live in Woodstock or somewhere else where they have ready access to, you know, a guide who can take them around and teach them all the natives? What would you recommend?
I smell fairies at my feet. I'm sitting under a linden tree. Bees are buzz and birds are tweet. Linden blossoms sure smell sweet. Linden, linden, heal my heart. You can bring me a brand new start. The linden is the tree that you find by your ears and your nose. You shut your eyes.
Okay. I like that.
Linden generally blooms the end of June, the beginning of July. And the blossoms are so sweet-scented that you truly can smell them from a distance. It's a big tree. It's also called American basswood. Okay. And the bees flock to the tree, making a buzzing hum. Now, there's not so many honeybees as there once were, and so I don't have to wait in line anymore, but used to have 4 or 5 bees queued up for every flower before I could pick them. If you're sitting under a linden tree, there are fairies at your feet. You're smelling the sweet flowers. You're hearing the birds. You're hearing the bees. And there are heart-shaped leaves. Linden, linden, heal my heart. One of my past apprentices called me up, and she said, you know, my doctor is very concerned because my cholesterol is really high. And I said, well, I'm not concerned. And she said, why's that? And I said, well, first of all, cholesterol is an unproven hypothesis. And we have never actually shown that higher levels of cholesterol lead to more heart attacks or that lower levels of cholesterol lead to less heart attacks.
Yeah.
I said, but there's a test. Now, this was quite some years ago, and so this doesn't sound nearly so strange now as it did then. I said, but there is a test I would like you to get, and it's called C-reactive protein. And it's a test for inflammation within the blood vessels. And C-reactive protein is very strongly linked to heart attack. If you have high C-reactive protein and high cholesterol, you are certainly in a higher risk group. So she called me back. And I got to thinking about her body type, too, which was heavy up top and slender down below, which is a heart attack body. And she said, yeah, my C-reactive protein is through the roof. And they had just finished a large study looking at B vitamin supplements to see if it would lower C-reactive protein, and the study was a bust. No, it didn't at all. And I said, well, you know, I don't really know what to tell you. So let's take this to the ancient ones. Let's take this to Dreamtime and see what we're told and what we should do. And she called me back the next day, and she sang that song to me. I smell fairies at my feet. I'm sitting under a linden tree. Linden, linden, heal my heart. You can bring me a brand new start. And she said, that's it. I'm drinking linden infusion. And linden is the kind of different infusion because the flowers are very bulky. We only use half an ounce of linden flowers in our quart jar.
Okay.
And the linden flower comes with a green thing that looks rather like a leaf, but it's not. And it is actually part of the flower and is used in the infusion along with the flower. So there's this kind of propeller blade green thing, and then a stalk depending, and then 4 or 5 flowers, linden flowers coming off of that. I really like the linden I get from Frontier because it's whole. And I find other suppliers have cut linden, and I don't like it as much as the whole linden. And there's also a YouTube of me harvesting linden with my apprentices with some really good close-ups of the linden tree.
Okay.
So that should also help you as well. So you'll use your nose to smell for it. You use your ears to hear the bees in it. You'll look for the heart-shaped leaves.
Okay.
And let all of your senses be your guide to the linden tree. Another way to find linden trees is to look on a map.
Oh, okay.
Because most towns have a linden avenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but... Well,
and guess what's planted on Linden Avenue?
Yeah, well, most cities, don't they tear out the trees and then just put up the name?
No, Linden Avenue usually has lindens planted on it because linden thrives in the city.
Okay, now
I've harvested linden in Toronto. I've harvested linden in Manhattan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it's everywhere. I just found a photo that looks, it looks a lot more familiar to me. This is the best photo I've found, and I found it actually right when you were saying the little puck things that hang down from the flowers. Now, I have recognized trees with, you know, little things like that hanging down. So how do we know for sure, besides using our other senses and asking the tree itself, if that's it? Are there lots of trees with these little pucks hanging down? Are they thin and feather-like, or are they thick? Are they pods for seeds? How do we know?
Starting from the tree, there's a small bit of stalk, then a green leaf-like thing that is rather stiff, that looks kind of like a tongue depressor or a propeller for a toy airplane.
Yeah.
And coming down from that is a piece of stalk. And from the end of that stalk is a cluster of 4 or 5 flowers, which smell very sweet. And there is no other tree in our area which has these characteristics. And those flowers turn into round, hard balls with a point on them.
Okay. And so we want to harvest the flowers?
The flower, which includes that green part. Again, there's a wonderful YouTube of my apprentices and myself harvesting linden flowers at a local mall.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because lindens are often planted at malls.
Okay, that's nice to know.
They're very hardy trees, and linden is a world-class anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
I don't know where you are in terms of what you think about inflammation and its consequences, but for over a quarter of a century, I've been telling my students that what we call chronic disease in old age is really the end result of unchecked inflammation.
Absolutely. It's definitely the common denominator in all dis-ease. But now...
and so having a very powerful anti-inflammatory that is nonetheless safe enough for a premature infant or somebody 114 years old that we can include in our rotation. So I'm drinking at least a quart of linden every week and more like 5 quarts in a month.
Okay, well, I'm going to go find me a linden tree. And you said they bloom June, July, so...
That's right.
It's like about a month to go find me some.
You won't be able to find it until it blooms.
Wouldn't that be cool if I have one in my backyard?
You very well could. So, you know, Isn't that how life always works? We say, I want to find a linden tree, and suddenly there it is.
It totally does.
Totally does. Meanwhile, linden is an item of commerce, and you can buy linden. As I said, I prefer the whole linden, which I get from Frontier.
Okay.
The cut linden can make a brew that's a little slimy for many people. If you heat it up and add a touch of honey to it, it's not slimy anymore. But I do understand people's, having grown up in Dallas and being subjected to okra, I understand how people can not like slimy.
Okay. All right. Why don't you find me some and make a tea anyways?
Right. And you were talking about preventative medicine before, and I really think of linden as preventative medicine. It's not only going to prevent colds and flus, but it's going to prevent dementia, Alzheimer's, blood vessel disease, stroke, heart attack, cancer, arthritis, rheumatism, all of these things that have, as you say so clearly, as a common denominator, inflammation. And some people say, now, cancer, isn't that reaching? But, if we look at the breast cancer statistics for women who have some problem that causes them to take anti-inflammatory drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs daily, we find that they have a significant drop in their breast cancer risk.
Excellent. Okay. This is beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing your herbs, and I'm really excited for the end of June to come up because I'm going to find a tree, and I'm going to pick off, almost every flower.
Well, since it's a tree and a perennial, it wouldn't mind if you did, but I doubt that you have enough daring do to climb to the top of an 80-foot tree.
Oh, well, yeah, probably not the top.
So I suspect that you, like I, will probably get maybe 5 or 10% of the blossoms, and the rest will be out of reach.
Yeah, okay. Well, that makes sense. And, I get, I want to talk about something you mentioned without really mentioning. I just kind of felt it, but I hear the music, so I guess we'll have to wait till after this short break. My goodness, how time flies. Second hour coming up here soon, so stay tuned. Susun Weed here on SoulJourneysRadio.com. Susan, maybe I heard something that you didn't say, and maybe it's just all in my head. But when I said, I'm going to go pick a whole tree, I heard you kind of hesitate. And so let me ask you this. You know what? I'll just speak for myself. I'll tell you what I was feeling. But I feel that there's kind of a code of ethics and honor when picking a plant. And so, just to make clear, I wouldn't normally go and just tear out a whole plant and completely devastate it and demolish it. I usually ask for permission when I'm picking what I need. For instance, mullein, I'll go and talk with the plant for a minute and ask for permission and ask which leaves that I am able to take. So let me ask you your thoughts on that, and if, maybe you were thinking that when I probably gave the perception that I was going to go demolish the whole 80-foot tree.
No, actually, I was not thinking that at all. I was remembering the YouTube that I was talking about.
Okay.
So there I am with, there are 4 or 5 apprentices and my daughter and maybe my granddaughter. And we're at a mall, and we're picking linden. Of course, there's all these people walking by. We're right by a big box store. And people are saying, what are you doing? And we're explaining to them that we're picking linden, and we're telling them about it being an anti-inflammatory and how it helps to prevent colds and flus and helps to cure colds and flus, and it tastes really good, and it's good for your throat, and it's just good for you. And some people are like hanging out and talking to us, and some people are saying, and walking on by. And suddenly we hear the sound of sawing. And we look over, and a man has a saw, and he is sawing off an entire limb of the tree.
Oh, wow.
And I say to him, what are you doing? And he said, well, this sounded so good, I decided to harvest some.
Wow. Okay. So just grab your saw, and that's kind of like mainstream medicine, though, isn't it?
So, I said to him, we're just picking the flowers, and this tree will be here year after year after year after year to give flowers to everybody who comes and wants flowers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you cut off the branch of the tree, then that branch won't be here anymore. And because it's one you can reach the flowers on it, and you can see. Of course, they plant shorter versions in malls than the big basswood trees that grow wild. But still, even, and we had the smaller apprentices sitting on the taller apprentices' shoulders so that we could reach up higher. But you still can't ever reach to the top of the tree. But I was thinking of this man. When you said, I'm going to harvest every flower, I'm thinking of this man with this saw, and he's like, I'm going to take some of this stuff home. And my heart, really goes out to that excitement, to that joy, to that sudden, aha, you mean the earth is here to heal me. We hear so many people talking about we have to heal the earth. We're the ones who have to save the earth. And simply not true. The earth is here to save us. The earth is here to heal us. It's kind of like being in a hospital bed, and the doctor comes in, you jump out of bed, throw the doctor in the bed, take the doctor's coat off, take the stethoscope, and say to the doctor, I will heal you.
Yeah.
The earth is our healer. We are not her healer.
Absolutely. Very good point. Thanks for pointing that out. And, but let me get you back to what I was thinking as far as kind of massacring or sawing a plant apart or ripping the whole thing out. I mean, I think it's completely unnecessary and somewhat disrespectful. So can you speak to us on maybe a code of ethics that you adhere to when wild foraging for yourself?
Well, let me tell you an anecdote, a story about my life. I was sitting one afternoon. It was late in the fall. And I'd worked hard that day, and the sun was going down. The goats were in the barn. And I was sitting with my back against my wood pile. I heat with firewood. I don't have any backup heat. And though, the sun was just at that wonderful warm last of the day and just beating on me, and it felt so good. And I closed my eyes, and there were butterflies and hummingbirds and rainbows and shooting stars, and just like in the comic strips, And then the sun, as it will at that time of the year and that time of the day, moved. And I got up to move with it because it was so warm and I wanted to stay in the sun. And then my back was against something else, not against the cut firewood. And I closed my eyes and I didn't see those images, and I thought, isn't that odd? So I went back and I sat in the cool with my back against the firewood and closed my eyes, and sure enough, there were all those happy day things. And in my mind, I said to the firewood, is this coming from you? And the firewood said, yeah. And I said, well, aren't you mad at me? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, aren't you mad at me for, cutting you down? You were trees, and I cut you down, and I cut off your limbs, and I sawed you up, and then I took a big mallet, and I split you into pieces, and then I'm going to burn you? Aren't you mad at me? What are you showing me all these, pretty things for? And the wood laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and said, we always forget that you humans believe in individual consciousness. And that you think you're separate.
Yeah.
And therefore you think we're separate. It said, I am not all oak. I am simply part of oak. And I am honored and thrilled that you will use me to stay warm, that you have handled me, touched me, moved me. You are going to bring me into your house, and then you will use my ashes in your garden. I am so blessed and so happy.
Awesome. That's beautiful, Susan. Thanks for sharing that with us.
I grew up in a white culture. You maybe grew up in a white culture, too. And in white culture, things have price tags.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything has a price tag. You don't go into a store and eat a banana. You have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so I discourage my white students from making offerings to the plants because it's too much like buying them off.
Yeah, definitely.
Instead, I ask us light-skinned people to do the harder thing, to go humbly, knowing that we have nothing to give, and to ask for help.
Yes.
It's very hard for us. It's not our culture. Our culture is not a culture that asks for help. And if we do ask for help,
but I think
we want to pay. And, of course, there is something that we do have that we can give to every plant, and that is our breath.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
And when we breathe with the plant, we exhale carbon dioxide, which the plant inhales, and the plant exhales oxygen, which we inhale, and so it is a giveaway dance.
Definitely.
We breathe out what the plant needs and wants. The plant breathes out what we need and want. We breathe out toxins, which is the breath of life to the plant. The plant breathes out toxins, which is the breath of life to us. You know, there are 3 traditions of healing. The scientific tradition, which measures and fixes. The heroic tradition, which cleanses toxins. And the wise woman tradition, which nourishes wholeness. There's no such thing as a person with a clean liver or clean kidneys, because if so, they would be dead. Every drop of blood in your body passes through your liver every hour.
Yeah.
And the liver is the recycling center. If we had nothing in the recycling center, then it would be all in the blood, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing.
So the idea of having a clean liver is anti-life.
Huh.
We should never have a clean liver. The liver should always have recycling. That's what it's doing. If the liver is clean, then it's not functioning.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
The liver is such a critical organ that every cell in it is replaced every 30 days. So if we focus on cleansing, which is simply code for damage and destroy, then in 30 days we will have damaged and destroyed our liver. If we focus on nourishing, then in 30 days we will have a healthier liver.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So let me ask you your thought on liver cleanses. I hear people asking about that.
Damage and destroy. I know hundreds of people who have lost their gallbladder from doing a liver cleanse.
Yeah, they end up getting sick and feeling like they have to do it again. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe you don't need to be that harsh to your body.
There's no maybe involved.
Yeah. Okay.
I will tell you truthfully, I don't believe in toxins.
Okay. So
because that's not the rule of this planet. The rule of this planet is I eat you and you eat me.
That's true.
If I was locked up in a room and it was sealed, I would die of carbon dioxide poisoning. We could say carbon dioxide is a toxin. And yet it is the breath of life to a plant. Yeah. If a plant was locked up in a sealed room, it would die of oxygen poisoning. That's a toxin, and yet oxygen is what we need to live. There's nothing on this planet that is a toxin. Everything on this planet is food. And when we allow our minds to open up to that truth, then we stop making war on ourselves, on each other, and on nature.
Okay, so I see they're in the text chat, they're saying, all right, no more liver cleanse. So I really appreciate you breaking it down for us like that, because I do agree. I think that, this knowing that we have is innate within us, but until we get out there with nature, we're certainly not trained to listen. We're not trained to hear. We're not trained to feel. We're trained to read. We're trained to follow orders, follow the leader. But those abilities are innate within us all. And, I was a city girl and grew up, really having no idea where food came from at all, or never even gave it a care in the world. And, weeds, what are those pesky things destroying my perfectly manicured lawn? And, so pretty much just like everybody else. But once I was given the opportunity to get out in nature, I was amazed at how it would speak to me. And I was no longer afraid of it. And, just kind of created my own relationship where I, obviously based on gratitude and respect. And I just saw how she kept on giving me information and helping me more. And, maybe she didn't provide an encyclopedia for me to read every single word that we describe in this English language to understand it. She just gave me a knowingness, use this, and this will be good for that. And that was enough. I learned to just trust that. And, Susan, you probably don't know, but I was in a wheelchair 4 years ago. 17 years ago, I was told I had 6 months to live. I was never supposed to walk again. I was paralyzed. And, I don't really want to waste a lot of time with all of the different diagnoses and stuff. But that's pretty much how I was 95% of my life until I stepped out and realized that Mother Nature, God, Goddess, Source, however people refer to it, is much smarter than men in white coats. So, yeah.
Yes. And this is one of the things I like about the Nourishing Herbal Infusions. I often think of the story of my apprentice, let's call her B. And she came to Talking Stick one morning, and when she got the talking stick, we do our talking stick ceremony every morning, she looked at me and she said, "I hate you." Now, I couldn't talk because I didn't have the talking stick, but I thought to myself, wow, that's great work. It's so fast, Mm-hmm. When you are in shamanic training, you need a very powerful teacher who can embody your shadow. Mm. Basically, the work of being a shaman, as Jung put it, Carl Jung, is not imagining figures of lights, but in making your own darkness real.
Yeah, wow.
That's what wholeness is about, becoming whole so that we can truly heal, because healing is wholeness to the wise woman tradition. So as the trainer of shamans, I need to be powerful enough to have them cast their shadow on me and think I'm a monster and hate me. And this woman's only been here 10 days. And I think, wow, usually this isn't until like the third week that they decide they hate me and that I'm what's wrong. So I'm really excited and interested. What is she going to hate me for? Because, of course, this tells me everything I need to know about this particular person when I find out what they hate me for. And she looks at me. I haven't said a word, right? Because it's talking stick, and she's got the talking stick. She says, "I hate you. I hate you." She said, "You made my M&Ms taste awful." And I did. I laughed out loud. And she went on, she said, "I didn't know that you considered chocolate a food group," which I do. Chocolate is a very important food group for all women. It's extremely healthy for your heart. Did you know that 2 ounces of dark chocolate has more polyphenols than a glass of red wine or a cup of green tea?
Wow.
Tastes a lot better than either of those two things do in my book. Anyhow, she said, "I didn't know that you really consider chocolate a food group." So I brought M&Ms with me because I can't live without chocolate. She said, and it took me, first 10 days to go through the first pound of M&Ms, and then I opened the second bag last night, she said, and the smell was awful. And I put them in my hand, and I could hardly hold them, and I got them to my mouth. I couldn't put them in my mouth. You have ruined M&Ms for me. And this is great. One of the things I love about the Nourishing Herbal Infusions, because I say to people, you don't have to change your diet. Keep on eating exactly what you're eating, whatever it is. Just start drinking Nourishing Herbal Infusions. And what will happen is, because the body always chooses the very best quality, is that when you get enough nourishment in you, your taste buds and your ability to smell get so turned on.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Oh, Susan, I'm so sorry. Hold that right there, though. It is that time. Stay tuned, everyone. We're going to be right back with the amazing Susan Weed here on SoulJourneysRadio.com. This chocolate thing we left off on, I certainly agree with you. It is definitely a food group and certainly necessary for me, at least, a week out of the month. And I'm realizing that, God, time is flying by so quickly. We didn't even really talk about your book Down There, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way, which we were scheduled to talk about tonight. So I'm wondering if chocolate would be a good segue.
I think it would. And, I have some good news for boys and some good news for girls.
Nice.
And I like to give the boys their good news first. And the good news is pizza prevents prostate cancer.
Oh, yay. All right.
Okay, repeat after me, boys. Pizza prevents prostate cancer, and it's just as effective cold the next morning. You want to really make that pizza a cancer preventative, then get extra garlic and anchovies. Because the anchovies have lots of omega-3 fatty acids, yay omega-3 fatty acids. And that garlic is a proven cancer preventative, and it's the cooked tomato sauce that's really doing the job there. So, yay, pizza. And I always hope that that will make the boys so happy and that they will think such wonderful pizza thoughts that they won't be too jealous when I share the good news for women. And the good news for women is there is only one kind of tissue in your body that never grows old, and that is your clitoris.
All right. I guess that's probably good news for boys, too.
Well, yes and no, because, it makes them a little jealous because they hit a peak somewhere between 15 and 20, and then it is literally downhill from there, whereas we hit the beginning between 15 or 20, and then it is all better. One of my students said, my 95-year-old mother wants me to buy her a vibrator. What should I do? I said, don't get her a battery-operated one. Get a plug-in model. Because, the orgasmic capacity of a 95-year-old woman surpasses that of a 15-year-old woman.
Okay, so, all right, I mean, since you brought it up, what's the difference between battery-operated and plug-in?
Well, the battery-operated gives out at the very moment when you need it most.
All right.
There's a very old medical diagnosis called hysteria. And hyster is the Greek word for womb. We still have it in hysterectomy, the removal of the womb, of the uterus. So hysteria is a moving womb. And even back in ancient Egypt, they thought that a woman's uterus could move around in her body and that it could addle her brain. And so this diagnosis of hysteria is a very old diagnosis. And it said that there is only one cure for hysteria, and that is paroxysm. And paroxysm was generally available at the doctor's office. It was a difficult condition to treat, however, because doctors found that this treatment was boring and tedious.
Okay.
Until the invention of the vibrator.
All right. Well, go science.
And at the turn of the century before last, between the 1800s and the 1900s, it was estimated that over 80% of all American women were suffering from hysteria. And their doctors had very, very tired arms. And they were thrilled to see the vibrator arrive because this mechanized a very important medical function. As a matter of fact, spas shot up overnight all throughout the United States offering vibration therapy for women suffering from hysteria.
Amazing.
And I do believe, I don't know much of anything about it, but I do believe that there is a current movie by that name that actually talks about the invention of the vibrator.
Okay.
Now, some women have said to me, well, I don't think, that I want to get involved with the vibrator at all because then, then I'll not ever be interested in people again, right? I'll just want to always do it with the vibrator.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, I can understand that, but you know what? I've never met a vibrator who compliments you, tells you you're looking good, says that you're really desirable. I've never met a vibrator who'll bring you a cup of tea or give you a back rub.
That's true. Takes you out on a date, dumps the trash. So.
I mean, there's just an infinite number of things that human beings do that vibrators don't. But I'm always interested to learn if I'm wrong about this. So far, I have not had anybody say, oh, you're so wrong, Susan. I have yet to meet a man who didn't figure out on his own how to masturbate.
Yeah. And
no teaching required. And yet, scientifically speaking, we know that up to 30% of women reach their early 20s without having figured this out.
Yeah, no, that's true. So I'm glad we're talking about it here tonight. I mean, would you say that sex is as... Because, they'll always justify why men can have tons of sex, but women can't, right? But, then they'll use the excuse, well, it's physically necessary for us. Well, Hello? We're human
Well,
too, so would you say it's as necessary for women as it is for men?
well, let me ask you a question that you might think is somewhat off the topic, but you'll see where I'm going with it. Okay. Bill and Monica, did they have sex?
Well, I kind of think so.
Well, most people kind of think so, don't they? And yet, most people, and I think you, were using the word sex to imply intercourse. One thing in another thing, shall we say.
Yeah, I guess my...
The fact of the matter is, in my interviews with women, there are very few women who would put intercourse, one thing in another thing, at the top of their wish list for sex.
Okay.
Not that they're adverse to it, not that they wouldn't want eventually to do it, but one of my students brought me some erotic writing she had done, and every story ended with the man having an orgasm. And I gave it back to her, and I said, no go. None of these are any good at all. There are no real women in these stories.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I would always say to my boyfriends, okay, let's get your first orgasm over with so we can have some fun. Let's just do it and get it over with, and then we'll be on more of an equal footing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and the average length of intercourse worldwide is just over 60 seconds, so it doesn't take long. And then, in fact, it is, a far more level, shall we say, playing field. However, to get back to the vibrator, what's very important, I think, about the vibrator is that this helps women to learn about themselves and then to be able to relate that to their partner when and if they wish to engage in partnered sex.
Definitely.
We don't really know what we like. It's pretty hard to tell our partner. And it's pretty hard to partner with somebody who goes, I don't know, maybe. It's like, oy vey, could we at least start with some good solids? I really like this. And not make me, reinvent the entire wheel here. Mm-hmm. So I also find that menopausal women say, my libido took a vacation and never came home. And I say, RX, 7 orgasms a week, whether you want them or not. And you remember those doctors with their tired arms. Well, we don't want to give you an RX that would cause your arm to become fatigued. So with your vibrator, you can knock off 7 orgasms in one day if you want to. I was member of the group that formed the Woodstock Women's Center, and we invited Betty Dodson to come up and talk to us. Betty Dodson, the author of Sex for One, and who taught a great many women how to have orgasms. And some of her beautiful, beautiful drawings are down there, Sexual and Reproductive Health for Men and Women, The Wise Woman Way. And Betty came up with a couple of her proteges, one of them a woman named Sheila. And, they did a little introductory talk, and then Sheila said, about the orgasms and self-pleasure. And Sheila said, well, so do you want to see me use a vibrator? And we were all kind of, do we? I don't know, do we? And Sheila takes off her clothes, and she lays down this very nice blankie in the middle of the floor, and she lays on, and she says, where's the plug? And she plugs in her vibrator. And she says, does somebody ever watch with a second hand? I'd like somebody to time me. And, most of us are, covering our eyes now. We're going, okay, so she took her clothes off. No big deal. We're all women. But, you don't just, talk about having an orgasm this way. I mean, it's kind of like a taboo thing to talk about. So she plugs in her vibrator, and she buzzes off 62 seconds.
Wow.
And we're all going, 62 seconds. And she says, okay, let's go for the second one. 21 seconds.
Damn.
And we're going, what kind of vibrator is that?
Yeah, and where can we all get one?
And just to see that woman in her power, because what's actually true is that ounce for ounce, inch for inch, women have as much erectile tissue as a man does. A man's erectile tissue is all, shall we say, gathered together in one lump, whereas a woman's erectile tissues are more spread out. We kind of usually compare like that big thing to our little thing. But in fact, our little thing, the clitoris, is far, far bigger than you think it is. There's great drawings in the book. As a matter of fact, nurses and other healthcare professionals are using some of the drawings from the book, which are based on work by Suzanne Gage, who with other women wrote a book called A New View of a Woman's Body. And the understanding of what the clitoris is and the great extent of it and how those spongy tissues fill with blood. And in a man, what happens is that there are little gates. And the tissues, the spongy tissues, the erectile tissues, fill up with blood, and the gates snap shut. And then when he has an orgasm, the gates snap open, and all the blood leaves. And that's pretty obvious. There's a lot of blood there. His organ becomes stiff and hard. There's no blood there. Bloop, flop. However, in a woman's erectile tissues, there aren't little gates. There's a literal flooding that happens. So when that tissue engorges, and then there's an orgasm, the tissue opens more and allows more blood in, so the next orgasm is stronger.
Yeah, that is true.
The period between when the gates snap open and when they can close again in a man is called the refractory period, the amount of time between one erection and another. There is no refractory period for a woman. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, a woman could have orgasm after orgasm after orgasm
on and on and
infinitely. Most of us get kind of sensitized and go, enough. 7's a reasonable number.
7 sounds pretty good.
But down there, sexual and reproductive health for men and women really just takes you step by step through having an orgasm and talking to women who are kind of late bloomers about orgasms. And also, a very interesting thing that I found out, and in the section on ovaries, and that is that ginkgo, an herb that we're all very familiar with, contains substances called ginkgolides. And ginkgolides actually destroy cancer cells in the ovaries. And they found that women who had taken ginkgo on a daily basis, even for as little as 6 months, had half the incidence of ovarian cancer as women who never took ginkgo.
Okay. Wow, that's good to know.
And pretty easy to do, too, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, definitely.
Right. Ginkgo, of course, we think of ginkgo as being like brain food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's an old joke, and it's funny, it's an old joke in almost every culture I've been in, that there's only so much blood in a man's body. So he can either think or have an erection. There's not enough blood for both things. And so we can understand then by inference why ginkgo, which we think of as increasing blood flow to the brain, is a great sexual tonic.
Definitely. That was very good analogies. I've appreciated your stories and so much wisdom in them. So I just want to thank you for spending your time with us tonight, Susan.